I Should Be Writing, Season 22, Episode 7.
Well, I should be writing. I should be working on my craft. I should be writing. I should be submitting my next draft. But I'm sitting home watching Doctor Who.
Hi there. Welcome to I Should Be Writing. This is a podcast for wannabe fiction writers. It's been going on for over 20 years. And I am Merle Lafferty, your host, and been a pro writer for, almost 15 years now. Why don't I have more books? That's something else. But anyway, I like to do this show to tell people that whatever emotion is telling you that you can't have a creative life, it's probably wrong, because every other writer I know also has that feeling. So to get started, if any of you listened to Ditch Diggers recently, Ursula gave me a talking to about getting started on my next book, and it actually helped. I've already done like 4,500, 5,000 words on a new project this week. So thanks, Ursula. But I am excited now to bring Justin C. Key on the show, the author of The Hospital at the End of the World. And we're going to talk about medicine and AI and short stories and novels and all sorts of stuff. I got a list here. So welcome, Justin.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I was also very, very honored when you said that back in the day you listened to this show and Writing Excuses a lot. And I'm just telling that so everybody else will know, because I think it makes me sound cool. So thank you for letting me know that.
Yeah, no, it was, I remember I lived in Oakland in 2009, and I used to walk from take the train home, and I remember walking, and I have a vision in my mind of like walking with my headphones on, like listening to your show. But yeah, very early on, I was just absorbing everything that I can, and I remember this and Writing Excuses being like pivotal in my like baby writing journey. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for telling me that. I'm glad. I always like to hear people, build careers, and I was there in their ears early on. So first we're going to talk about The Hospital at the End of the World, because that is what just came out. But I was looking at your everything you've written, including a short story bought by me and Valerie Valdez at Escape Pod. And want to talk about that too. So first, tell us about Hospital at the End of the World.
Okay. Yeah. So Hospital at the End of the World is my first novel, and it's a science fiction medical thriller novel. And really, on the surface, it's AI versus medicine. But I like to think it's a lot more than that. I'm a practicing psychiatrist. So I went through medical school, but I was a writer before I went through medical school. But the book, it's a step in the future, about 20 years in the future. And we're just starting really to kind of give the keys to society over to AI. And AI, this conglomerate, the Shepherd organization, has just bought all of the medical schools, and it's seeing like taking over medicine as the key to kind of really taking over everything. And the main character is this 20-year-old or so medical school applicant who grew up in New York, which was like the hub of like AI. So he grew up with all the latest technology. He's very, that has been his norm. And he thinks that AI is the future, especially with medicine. And he's like a top applicant to medical school. So he applies to all the top ones, gets rejected from all of them, and then realizes that his father, who's also a physician, and has been an old school physician, is in the crosshairs of the Shepherd organization because the father is almost like a whistleblower. And then that leads to his father's mysterious death, and the main character having to flee New York, all that he knows, to go to New Orleans, which happens to be like one of the last holdout cities that has rejected the latest technology, has rejected AI, and they have one of the last human-led hospital and human-led medical school that teaches human medicine. And Pac has to go there, become a medical student there, and then it becomes a school story. It's also some medical mystery there too, as Pac tries to navigate being a medical student while also discovering like his own mysterious past and figuring out like, what his father had to do with it, what he has to do with it. So at its core, AI versus medicine, I guess, would be like the one-liner. But it's a lot of implications about, what AI means and technology means for, humanity, that human connection, law, sports, art. In a lot of ways, it's my love letter to medicine, because it's very hard to, I think, appreciate the power, I think, of becoming like a healer or a physician, going through the rigors of medical school. So actually being able to write this has been me being able to find actually the joy in the process of medical school.
That's amazing, because there's what gets me. I've talked to a couple of pro writers who are also medical doctors, and I'm always amazed that most of us, our goals are to make enough from our writing to support ourselves so we can leave the day job. But it sounds like you are in the absolute perfect day job, and it's helping your writing. So where do you ever see the balance of fiction versus medicine tipping another way, or are you happy with the ratio that you have right now?
Yeah, I definitely would like the ratio to shift, and I'll tell you my ideal world. But I remember like being in medical school, and especially at like the hardest parts, thinking like, man, if I could just make this right, sell this book, make this right, and maybe I don't have to finish medical school.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I found psychiatry, because I enjoy what I do as a psychiatrist. It can be heavy work. It can be things that still lead to burnout or what have you. But I really enjoy being an outpatient psychiatrist and also do a lot of therapy. So in an ideal world, in like a 5-day work week, 4 days of them would be writing, and then 1 day I'd be seeing patients. So that writing from very young has been the dream, like to be a novelist, to be a career novelist. And I would love to have the opportunity to be like, I could just write. I think that unless I really like had to, I think I would still do the clinical work, because it means a lot to me. But I would love to be in a position where I can do it as a choice and not a necessity. But that's in an ideal world.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you have written many, many, many short stories, and they are not in shabby anthologies either. You have your own collection. That was The World Isn't Ready for You, correct? That's
Yes.
The one behind you, actually, if you're watching the video. But then you got a story in Out There Screaming, which I have not read yet, but I really want to, because I know a lot of the authors in it, and that's the Jordan Peele anthology of Black
Yes.
written horror, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. How was that like? How did that work? Did you submit to it, or were you solicited, or what?
So John Joseph Adams reached out to me. I had just been in one of the Year's Best. I think it was 2022, edited by Rebecca Roanhorse. I had a story from an anthology that made it into there. So I just started to be on his radar, and I had a short story in Lightspeed. And I remember he reached out to me, and maybe this was July of 2022. It's like, I have a very exciting project. I can't really tell you what it's about yet, and et cetera. And I remember thinking, I do not have time, but yes,
Yeah.
So very, very grateful to have been there. And there was no guarantees from the beginning, so there was my writer anxiety. It was all like, okay, I have this opportunity.
Yeah.
And if I don't like execute, then I'm going to feel like a big failure. But I think I remember like a day or two later, I was on a panel at a museum, and it was about the intersection of different types of art. And somebody in the audience asked, I think they asked me specifically, have you ever seen like a futuristic take on a different type of art or something like that? And right then, while I was answering, I was thinking, what if in the future, like with genetic editing, like if humans were like someone's art, in terms of like they were art pieces because of genetic editing goes in and becomes like maybe public or what have you. And I remember joking, I was like, I'm gonna go home and write this story right now. And that's actually the genesis for the story that I wrote.
Oh,
That was
cool.
in Out There Screaming. But then I remember so I submitted it and then, super nervous just about, and then I got word that my story was going to be part of the collection. And then when I saw the table of contents, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is really great company to be in. So so that was, and it came out, from a logistical perspective standpoint, it came out like a month after my first book of my short story collection. So it was also, and I know a lot of people was like, oh, I saw your story and Out There Screaming, and I looked you up. So it was also great timing for me just from that perspective too.
I know a lot of people who are writing short stories and they're either intimidated by the idea of a novel or just don't think they're ready. And you have such a backlog of excellent stories. What made you take the step to make your next one a novel?
Yeah, so, I kind of sandwiched it because in the beginning, before I started publishing short stories or focusing on short stories, I have a lot of trunk novels. Some of them I think are on this shelf behind me. But I remember in 2007, I read Stephen King's On Writing, and he was like, first million words of practice. He writes every day. Author's job is to read a lot. And so I sat down and started writing. And before I knew it, I had like 100 pages of like this first novel. And I finished a draft of that and I put it aside and I started another one and wrote that longhand in like 3 months.
Wow.
And then I went through the process of, revising them. I was in college, like sending out to my friends list, like anybody want to read my novel. I was really thinking, okay, I want to be a novelist. I want to try. So I do have quite a few, sitting either on a shelf somewhere or on a drive somewhere. And I say that all to say is that I did, once I had, I think established myself with short stories, because it's a great place to go and be in the writing community, to be part of critique groups. It could take somebody like months to read and critique a novel, whereas I could write a draft of a short story in a week or two, and then somebody could read it in a day or two, and then we could be talking about it, shortly after that, and then I can go and revise. And there's a lot of things I think that translate over in terms of like the line by line prose, characterization, dialogue. A lot of that, I feel that I grew and learned through the short story. And then when it was time to transition back to a novel, mentally I had it in my head like, oh, I can finish a novel length of work. I've done this before. I just got to go back and tap into that and then bring all of the things that I've learned. So, the knowledge that I could do it was there, but then, actually executing in terms of it working, was that anxiety. Definitely, I think even, finishing this draft was like, okay, but you've published short stories, and people seem to like them, but, what if it doesn't translate to a novel? What if like, the feedback is that, it's clear that, you should stick to short stories. All that was in my head.
Yeah.
And then I had to kind of push through it. But to answer your question, I think one of the things that helped with me is that I would remind myself, okay, this isn't new for you. You're going to, return to like what you were doing before in a way.
So you said something, and you said it so offhand that I don't think you realize how remarkable it is. You said you wanted to write a book, so you wrote a book, and then you put it away, and then you wrote another book. Almost every writer I know has that book be the book of their heart, and they edit it so much, and they submit it so much, and they get a hold of the idea that if my baby is rejected, if I ever have to turn my back on this, that will be soul crushing. And I mean, I'm a writer too. I understand the emotional connection to that, but I've never heard anybody say that, like, I wrote a book to learn how to write a book, and then I wrote another book. So can you explain a little bit your emotions, how that was that time? Because you said it very evenly like a very healthy mentally healthy person. So,
Yeah.
but what were you going through like that?
I think that I think a big part of that was having read Stephen King's On Writing, and it's almost 20 years since I've read it, so I wonder how much of it's evolved to kind of fit my narrative in my mind. But I remember him talking about getting through that first draft and then putting it aside because he needed to have some space away from it, and he'd usually work on something else. So I actually the first novel, I did come back to it, and then it had its different drafts. Like I sent it out to agents, it was my baby. But I remember having like simultaneously while writing it, thinking like, oh, this could be the next big thing, et cetera. This could be it. This is great. And then it felt like it was part of the plan, that it was like, okay, well, I have to put this aside to let it marinate because Stephen King told me so, and since I had been, pretty much on a roll and like had been writing and writing and writing, I was able to naturally move on to the next thing. And it was very different. It was tonally different. Like that first novel was a fantasy novel about parallel universes that has everything in it. And then the next one was like, a more intimate, like horror novel. And I also did it all longhand. So it was like a different experience for me. So, and then I do think that that's been helpful for me because with short stories, I really, as I was transitioning short stories and submitting those, I really like internalized or listened to when I would hear more established writers saying that, that acceptance is built on like a pile of rejections, right? So I really would say, okay, once I finish this story and submit it, I made like a spreadsheet and I keep track of it, but I'm working on the next thing. Doesn't mean that I wasn't, I'm still on Duotrope, that I wasn't like reloading the kind of response times and saying like, okay, they submitted theirs before mine and they just got rejected. So maybe that means that, I would still do that, but it would be as procrastination as I was working on the next thing. And I think even right now, to be honest, like I'm working on a draft of this novel. And I'm hoping to get it to some of my other writing friends from Clarion West to critique. My deadline for myself is April 1st. And then I'm going to, I know I'm going to take a break from that. So I'm already thinking in my head, trying to start like this next one, like this actual novel that I outlined to a little bit of degree before I went into med school, but never returned to. So I do think that there's like a duality of, excitement about the current thing. And then also, okay, but while I wait for that to, get to its next stage, can I be excited about something else? And I think that has boded me well. But I definitely, with that first novel, I did return to it, and definitely was a period of times where it was like the thing that I was hoping to try to take me there. And then, it got all of its rejections and it had all of its heartache. But while I was sitting, waiting for that time, I did work on something else. And I'm grateful that I, was able to do that really early on because I think it just became a part of my process.
There's a comment in chat, and it's not really a question, but I'm curious if you have a response to it. Underpope says, I kind of wish that my last therapist who advised me to quit writing understood the process and hazards of the writing career. That just makes me sad.
So it said the therapist. So there's two parts to that because it's definitely like, advisors quit. It sounds like wish that they knew the hazards, which makes it sound like almost that would be coupled with somebody who advised them not to. But what I would say is, I think that having a kind of a recognition that, writing is going for, it's very uncertain. You hear a lot about, there's a lot of the things to look towards, to strive for. When I was 22, I thought in my soul, I was like, I'm gonna be the next Stephen King. And, now, 18 or so years later, it's like, I don't think I'm gonna be the next Stephen King, but I'm hoping to, that I will reach readers and they will, and they will find something that touches them from my writing and that, so it evolves, right? But I think that being able to recognize that, there's various levels of success, there's various levels of connection, engagement, and also how long it may take. I think that, if I were to go back to my 22-year-old self and say like, hey, this is going to take about 15 years.
Yeah.
I know you just bought that 2011 guide to literary agents.
The big fat writer's market book. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I
on
remember.
the shelf somewhere. And, I know you just bought that and you feel it's going to be it, but, it's not. By the time you find an agent, everybody in here will be retired,
Yeah.
So I think that at that time it might have been like, should I continue doing this? So I think it's a mix of like having like hope for something to happen, like even like sooner or what have you, but also recognizing, okay, this may be a marathon. And I think along the way, taking care of yourself, whatever that may look like. And I think having a writing community was pivotal, I think, to me, and still is. Like my writing friends still, jokingly be like, all right, Justin, calm that anxious part of your brain down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking of writing community, I didn't see if you're still doing it, but you did writing advice for Scribophile before.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That is a large online community of writers and they do critique groups, don't they?
It's been it's probably been like 15 years.
Oh, okay.
But I do remember, like, so I graduated from college in 2009. And then I went to med school in 2013. And in the middle of that, I was trying to kind of figure things out. My plan with graduating college was to move to Hollywood and try to like, break into screenwriting because it seemed like that was something where, okay, I can get a job in the industry and maybe work my way up while I'm working. And then I decided, prose is what I've been working on. Let's just find like, another job. I actually had a few blog writing jobs at the time. Like I wrote for Wellness FX, which was this like health startup, and I wrote their blog, and and I remember Scribophile was also one of the things, and I can't remember how many blog posts I did for them, but I think I worked for them like maybe for like a year, and I had a great experience. I remember I wrote a review of a book by, I probably pronounced the last name wrong, but Warren Fahy, Fahy. He did like a Michael Crichton-ish book. That was about like evolution going like really fast or what have you. And I remember he responded to it on the blog post, but that was really cool. But yeah, I remember it's good to know or hear that they're still out there thriving. Being an engaging community.
A lot of times people ask if they can't get a local workshop going, where to go online. So I'm always eager to find new places that people can assure me are good, safe places to take your work. You also did, one of the problems with anthologies is it's hard to market them. So I was looking at all the books you were in, and one is called Vital, which is a futuristic. It almost seemed like a futurist approach to medicine and AI rather than just science fiction. I've talked to some futurists before. They are way, way above and beyond the way I can look at the world. So I'm always amazed. So I was really interested, and I recognized a lot of the people in that anthology. So what can you tell me about how that came to pass?
Yeah, so that was, around the pandemic time. So I'm thinking like maybe 2021. And I actually, this was back when Twitter was Twitter. I remember seeing a post about it, and I messaged them and was like, I was a doctor by then. It's like, I'm a doctor, I'm a writer, just right up my alley. I don't know if you're open to submissions. I'd love to. They actually, I don't think ever saw that, but they had an opening, and Corey Doctorow, who's one of my instructors at Clarion West, he had told them, you might want to think about Justin. He's a physician. And so then I think they saw that I'd also messaged, so we connected. And I remember it was a short turnaround. And I'm still in this season of my life where I kind of, I try to overstretch myself, but it was a short turnaround. And he was like, I was hoping maybe you had something ready. And I was like, I don't, but I will. So I remember, wrote a story. It's called The Algorithm Will See You Now. And it's about just a mid-career psychiatrist, a step in the future mid-career psychiatrist who had actually had for lack, just crudely put, an ablation surgery or procedure to quote unquote get rid of schizophrenia very young, but she didn't remember that. And then as she's practicing, she sees a young patient who's going through like a first break, and it starts to bring back that part of her. And then it's dealing with like the decision she made, dealing with like somebody making a different decision, and also dealing with how like she guides the care of this patient. And there's a lot of guidance through like tracking programs. She, is able to adjust her own anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where the AI piece comes in, like The Algorithm Will See You Now. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity for two things. It was one of two original stories in the anthology. The rest of them were reprints. And then that's the story that got me into the best American science fiction.
Oh, very
fantasy.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. And so it found a broader audience from there. And then also, the original publisher of the anthology, Inlandia, it's been great, just working with them. They're just, like great champions, and excited. I've done like, readings for them, and I'll be in an anthology, I believe a subset, which is Blacklandia. It's a Black mental health anthology. So I wrote a short story. It's actually not speculative, but it's a short story about a young couple who has a young kid who's on the spectrum. They're both very well-meaning, but they have just different thoughts about how to go about parenting. So it's the struggles that they have. And then I wrote a companion essay about that topic. And that'll be out in an anthology that's coming out from them, I believe, either next month or in May. So I still have that, I think, in me when people reach out and say like, hey, do you have something for this? You have time for this? A lot of times it'll be no, but I try to make it happen just because of the doors it's opened up for me. So that's the story behind that one.
Mm-hmm. The way you were talking about writing your next projects made it sound like you're not contracted for another book now.
Right.
Was the hospital was one book contract?
It was two books. These the first is short story, and then the second one was this.
Okay, that's how.
So
gotcha.
Yeah.
So what are you? What is the project of your heart coming up?
Project of my heart. Oh, okay. I mean, I think technically the one that I'm working on now, I've had it. It's a body horror like sci-fi mashup that I'm really excited about the idea, and I love body horror, and I kind of to be able to do it well. So working on that. That's what I'm. I talked to my agent like the day before this book came out, and I think we're both excited about it. I just have to make it. I have to. Execute, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But after I put this aside, there is like a science fiction idea surrounding like bees and the collapse of bees that I've been very, fascinated by. And before I went into medical school, I remember I bought all these like books on bees and was doing all this research. And then not to go too much into it, but it's basically the idea is like, what if they had like these connections where there's an emergent consciousness that comes out, and then what happens from there, especially if the bee population is dying and they're like, humans are the reason. So, I'm thinking of kind of like another sci-fi thriller. So I'm excited really to get back into that because it's been playing in the back of my mind like 14 years now. So that's like, I think the book I'm working on right now is the one of my heart. And then that one is the one of like my mind, like intellectually. And they both, have a little bit of piece of the other one there. So that makes sense.
So let's talk about your writing routine. I'm very interested again because it sounds like your day job does inform your writing quite a bit. But I know a lot of people who have day jobs just try to figure out how to. Actually, I remember on your bio you said, "Don't ask him this," but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
How you do schedule that kind of writing and all of your medical work.
Yeah. So a lot of times, for a lot of the time, it has been, writing in the margins. And I've been throughout the years, it has changed. There's been times where I would wake up in the morning and I would write, or it'd be times where like writing at night was, where I would get the writing done. I find as I've gotten older, like writing at night is just a disaster because I'll just fall asleep and be, upset with myself, and the sleep isn't that good, et cetera, et cetera. There was times when I was in residency, after like an overnight shift, I would go to a cafe and write. I am thankful that in the last couple of years, I've been able to carve out time in the day. So Mondays and Thursdays are my writing days. And then, I see patients Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And then, I basically can make my own schedule because of the practice that I work in and my, involvement in it. So sometimes I'll see patients Mondays and Thursdays. And also, I'll move things around to kind of be, sometimes I might, do writing spurts, right? So from very early on, my wife would gift me these like weekends away where then I would go and just write. And I can actually be super productive at those weekends. I remember finishing up a draft of The Hospital at the End of the World. I went maybe like 2 nights and 3 days and just extremely locked in, and super productive. Whereas I feel like now, my writing days, I wish I could tap into that because then I have all this time and I don't have like that fire under me as much, where like going through this current draft where there's no deadline except for like what I made for it. Nobody's really like my writing critique friends. If I said like, hey, I need more time, they'd be like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
Take the rest of the year. I find it harder to not succumb to the distractions. And let's see. So I will still, as things, for example, get closer to my self-imposed deadline for this, I will do it a little bit more in the margins. Like, for example, I have it printed out, and tonight, my kid has soccer practice from 7:15 to 8:30, and I'll probably I did this last night because he has it Wednesdays and Thursdays. I sit in the car and do longhand edits on that. I actually do get a lot of productivity done on planes because I'm away from like social media, I'm away from the kids unless I'm traveling with them. So if I have like a 5-hour plane ride, I don't like red eyes because I want to be well rested. I'm able to lock in there. So to answer your question, I think over the years, I have been able to show myself that I can kind of write in different settings. Excuse me. And sometimes it's very beneficial because writing longhand or editing longhand can break through if I feel like it's hard to get the words on the page with like a word processor, or sometimes I'll write on my phone, like I might go and then it's something I could be struggling to get like 200 words on Word, but then I go and open up like this writing app like Bear on my phone, and before I know it, I have like 500 words just because it's a different medium. So I've been very versatile in that, but Mondays and Thursdays are my official writing days, but it's still fluid. Like, for example, next month, April, I'm seeing patients Mondays and Thursdays because April is when my friends will be critiquing the novel that I hope to finish now. So, it's to then make room for like, if I need to maybe take a week off later in May or June to go and revise, depending on where it ends up being.
Right. I do want to talk about one more of your anthologies. You have written in Many Worlds, which is a shared universe you're doing with other authors. And it's interesting because I think 1 or 2 summers ago, I was talking to Wale Talabi, and he's also writing, like doing a shared universe thing. And so this is the second time I've heard it. So I'm curious, like, how does that come to be, and how do you find writing in that sort of world? Not good word, not a good noun there, but situation.
Yeah. So I remember, and I'm not sure if there's someone else that was right at the very, very beginning, but I think of it, and so apologies if someone else was, as Codwell's, like his original baby. I remember seeing on Facebook him saying, "Hey, I want to do something shared. I want to do something new," and I reached out, and it was great. I think especially like the meetings that we had in the beginning, the collaborative process. There's this. I actually didn't get to that story in time, but I think there's a story either in Many Worlds or in another one of them where people, different people contributed to one story where it's flipping like through the different narratives. And I remember I just couldn't get it to the deadline to kind of get in. I think I wrote like 2 paragraphs, but saw what other people were doing. And to be honest, I just haven't been able to be as involved since then. So it's gone from something where I was like actively on the meetings in the beginning, but then as things, started to kind of progress for my own, like getting like this 2-book deal, I got it in April of 2022. And, since then, and also, my practice, and I've had a 3rd kid. So other parts of my life, it just kind of like expanded. So I've been watching it more from afar, and saw like the collective book they just put out, as like one collective author. So it's amazing what they're doing. And, I've been in touch with Codwell, and, I've let him know, like, I, love to still be involved in the future, if that opportunity comes up. But I remember from the very beginning, just, because writing can be a very solitary act.
Oh, yeah.
And, being on these meetings with other writers and, talking about like the details of the worlds and how they can kind of integrate with each other's was very cool. And felt like I got a glimpse into like what you may hear of like writer's room for TV, where like people, without the toxic parts, so.
Yeah. By the way, for the people listening or watching, we're referencing Codwell Turnbull, who was on the show at the end of last year. So you should go back and listen to that if you're curious about him. So I like to ask authors about mistakes they've made. So hopefully we can warn beginners, maybe don't do that, even though as someone who had advice and did not listen to it, I understand that may not happen, but at least we can say we told people. Do you have anything in your writing career that you regret or acknowledge as a mistake, or even if you want to look at it positively, something you learned from?
Yeah. Sometimes I'm hesitant to say like what I could change, because even though it's taken me years, I'm very grateful for the position that, I have now. And even like that first book that's on my shelf, I'm like, if that had been published, that might not have been good for me, just in terms of like that being the first thing that's out there. But one of the things, that I'd say is back in 2019, around that time, like I had an opportunity for an earlier draft of a novel that an editor was interested, and had suggested like some significant edits. And I remember them saying to me, I want your best, not your fastest. But I remember thinking like, oh, I got to get this, I got to get this done, et cetera, et cetera. And, it's kind of 2 things. I think I was at a very difficult time of my training. And I remember just really burning myself out on it to get almost a self-imposed like deadline on it, to kind of get it out, like kind of thinking in my head, like, I don't want this opportunity to pass me by or what have you. And, in the end, it ended up being like a pass. And I think that I rushed it, and put too much, I think, physical, emotional, and career weight on it, where, to be honest, it kind of, not for too long, it kind of broke me a little bit from like a writing standpoint, and then I actually returned a little bit, I returned to short stories and kind of regained that love for writing, because I think at that time, even I found myself every time I would sit down to try to write afterwards, I would get like extremely fatigued, and it would just be hard. So I had to kind of rebuild like the positive connotations to it. So what is that to say? I think that the advice that they gave me, it's like, I want your best, not your quickest. And, it could be hard to, especially as things change or what have you, and time goes by so quickly, like you don't want to squander the moment or what have you, but it can definitely sometimes feel like, oh, now or never, I have to do this, I have to do this. But, if you go too quickly or go too hastily or what have you, then, the opportunity may just not be there. And even if you go slow and the opportunity seems to pass, you'll have something better, to be out there, better to work with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I am at the end of my questions. Is there anything you would like to mention or talk about?
Let's see. I do think, so thinking about like what I in young writers, I would instill the importance of like writing community, importance of critiquing. I think that it's important to learn how to take critiques, I think, early on.
Yeah.
And even recognizing when you're going to find critiquers that are going to like prescribe. They're going to be like, I think you should do this, this.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that. And then recognizing that you can still get something out of their critique without necessarily listening to what they're telling. For example, I think this draft early on, like there was a short story years ago, was like, I don't know if you really need the AI as a villain. Like, I feel like you could take that whole aspect out. And I remember like, this is, I like this aspect, but what I'm hearing is that maybe it's just not working for them in some way. So I take that frame and I go back, okay, when I revise this, how can I take what I heard there and maybe cross-reference it with other critiques, and what isn't working about this particular aspect? And I also challenge people to, if they find themselves getting, defensive or what have you, you're not going to have that opportunity on the page, right? And, sometimes I'll take opportunities when I think that even if people are coming from it with not the best self-aware, like cultural lens, then I will recognize that. And I also think to myself, it's like, okay, is this something that I would want to change to try to encapsulate them as well and people like them? And sometimes it might be no, they're just not my audience, versus it might be like, maybe there is something here where I can, kind of rope them in, bring them in, and then, and then have what it is that I'm trying to say land, where they might even recognize that they're like nodding their head against something that they've already come to the table of disagreement with. So that's all to say, critique groups, whether it's online, whether it's on person. And I think going to conferences, I think is a great way to be involved in the community as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are things I'd say for like younger, or not younger, but just people who are still trying to figure out this writing thing.
Sure. Yeah. Do you mean like conferences like Writers Digest puts on like the big conference in New York, or do you mean conferences like science fiction conventions, or both?
Yeah, I meant conventions.
Okay.
I meant like, like I used to go to ReaderCon when I was I just went to BosCon, and
oh man, this is the first year I actually did not go to BosCon.
Yeah.
Are you going to be at Worldcon?
Yeah, so that's in Los Angeles. Yes.
Yeah. Because when I heard you were from Los Angeles, I figured, well, you might be going to Worldcon. That would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
excellent.
I should definitely be there.
Well, I'll be there, and several of the audience will be there who are vocal in the community anyway. So hope I get a chance to see you. Where can we find you online?
Yes. So Justin C. Key. So that's where the C is important.
That's right. The C is important.
.com. And I'm on pretty much all the social medias. On Instagram is Justin C. Key. I have like a very pathetic attempt at TikTok. So, look at your own risk. I mean, it's nothing controversial. It's just
Yeah.
amateur.
Yeah.
Justin Key, and then the books wherever you get your books.
Yeah. Well, the book is The Hospital at the End of the World, and a great number of very highly regarded short story collections as well. You can find me at merverse.com, and I'm online most everywhere as Mighty Mer, except for Instagram, where I'm Mighty Mer 2 because of a mistake with a Hotmail account a very long time ago. I stream live on Twitch Tuesdays, or no, not Tuesdays and Thursdays anymore. Wow, that changed. Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I Should Be Writing, and every once in a while I'll be on Monday with Ditch Diggers with Ursula Vernon, aka T. Kingfisher. I keep forgetting that's becoming her more popular name. But hopefully you guys will go check out some new books and get to work on your own, because you should be writing. Thank you for listening to I Should Be Writing, the longest running writing podcast in existence. This episode was made possible by the Fabulous, who support the podcast via Patreon or Substack. Join the Fabulous at patreon.com/mightymer or mightymer.substack.com. Theme music provided by John Anelio, art provided by Numbers Ninja, and podcast hosting provided by Libsyn. This episode is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 license. You can find all of my books and podcasts at merverse.com.
I should be writing. I should be submitting my next draft, but I'm sitting home watching Doctor Who. Yeah, I'm sitting home watching Doctor Who.